Hello, I'm Dr. Lisa Kiesel. In this presentation, I will present information on how you can use to write and use a focused policy brief. We're going to begin with trying to gain a better understanding of the purpose of this advocacy tool, and then to understand what you need to know to get started. Want to familiarize you with one possible template, and then observe a few examples. To begin, I want to extend my thanks to MSU Mankato MSW students Rebecca, Jessica, Karen, and Samantha for use of their policy brief, which is our launching point for this presentation. We see here these students' policy brief addressing concerns around exclusionary disciplinary practices and policies affecting students, particularly BIPOC students and BIPOC students in special education in Minnesota. They have constructed a brief which is really more of an issue brief with a deeper dive into the issue of concern and providing a number of possible ways to respond. So we'll walk through this a little bit. So you can see here they begin with a nice introduction. All students deserve to be in school. Solutions, not suspensions. That's a grabbing and interesting title. They've done a nice job with an issue statement so we know what this is going to be about. An overview of the problem, which contains some nice narrative stories, as well as some good definition information here to understand specifically what is being addressed. They also tell the story through the numbers with these nice figures that detail who is affected. And then further, they bring the information about our current policy situation in regard to this. And then to provide an idea of alternatives to this situation with how to create a positive school climate. Talking about trauma-informed schools, talking about restorative justice. We see a nice diagram here to work from. Great links throughout so people can get more information, again, taking a deeper dive. And as well as the social emotional learning programs that schools can embrace. From all this information, they draw together a position statement and 5 distinct recommendations targeting change to various points in this problem situation. So a really nice job, and we're gonna use this to sensitize us to the issue as we learn more about the use of the policy advocacy tool. Returning to our slides. So when we're using policy briefs for focused action versus a deeper, more comprehensive understanding of the issue, we are really wanting to have a sense of what is the action we seek. When we're looking to make changes for issues of concern, we have 3 broad areas that we think about. First, we look at either adding or changing laws or statutes. That's often a very focused ask to create change. We also may be looking to seek changes in policies and practices at the agency or program level. And finally, we may be looking broadly to an effort to change hearts and minds. This can be to motivate others to action, changing of perspectives, commitment to the cause, rallying of constituents, or our own professional peers to move toward change in our services. Knowing that, we continue on to the question of, well, what do we need to know then to actually put together a focused brief? This can seem fairly overwhelming, but it boils down to 4 main areas. You want to have an understanding of the problem. What is a clear and succinct way to make sense of the problem? And if we have a problem, what is it that needs to change? What could be different? And then to understand who could make this change, who has some power, a role, legitimacy, etc. to make this change. And then to ask, who am I trying to reach? Who is the audience for this brief? Who am I wanting to take action in order to support the change I seek? with some clarity on that, we dig in a little deeper. So what do we actually need to do to put this into an advocacy brief? You want to first define and describe the problem, what it is, who it impacts, how it impacts, and you can provide useful links when it's possible. Allows people the opportunity to dig in and learn more. You'll want to talk about what the current status is of the policy or practice. What is happening now? And then based upon that, what can and should be done? What could be different? So being specific about what changes you're proposing. You want to make your case. Why does this matter? What's the so what here? And this is often tied to things like a social work value, to best practices, to social justice concerns for our populations, etc. How do you motivate others to be concerned in the way you are? With some groups, this could be a money argument about cost savings, etc. And with that, what specific action do you want the audience to take? And to be specific about what is the focused action now. With these focus briefs, you're not looking to solve every aspect of the problem. You have chosen a focus that has some immediacy to take action now. And so you want to be clear and specific about that. You may want to consider providing linked contact info or a script if you're asking people to reach out to a legislator or other decision maker, or information with links if you're asking people to share about new practices, so that they can have the information and communicate more about that and pass along that information to the decision makers they're wanting to consider. You may be asking yourself, who am I to tell anybody what to do? Who am I to guide or direct action? Well, who you are most likely is a social worker or an emerging social worker. And as social workers, we do have unique and often very intimate perspectives on these issues because they're the ones that affect the people we serve, with whom we work, and with whom we have concern. We provide a specialized insight into these particular issues. And as such, we are also in a position with our profession to have an ethical mandate to advocate with and on behalf of those whom we serve. And so bearing that in mind as a part of our responsibility, as in combination with your unique knowledge, I hope that this can help equip you to guide others in action you see as being important. We're going to look here at a potential template that the NASW Minnesota has created for these brief action-oriented policy briefs. So you can see here through the NASW Minnesota chapter a template of a way to talk about legislative action. You can see here that there is including here the bill title and any of the numbers that go with it, be it a House file or a Senate file. You can see here that we have the action alert, and then it says insert date. It is really important that any advocacy brief you put together, that you include the date, including the year, so that people know how current this is, if this is a live action or something from the past. And then you can see there are just some general categories to address that resonate with what we talked about on the slides. You want to write about the problem. You want to write about the proposed solution. You want to write about the connection to social work, why we care. These can be connections to our legislative agenda, our values, our ethics, etc., as mentioned previously. The unique things of why social workers should want this to be different. What do critics say? You may know of what the opposition says to this, that they may say this costs too much money. This is a lot to spend for this problem. Well, it may be helpful to note that concern about cost and consider the alternate of not paying up front for that problem. What are the long-term costs? You may want to make that argument. And then there's a specific section about action steps. So what is actually happening that makes this action now important? In this, we can see on this template that the bill is moving through the House and Senate committees. Why now? That would be why. And then to provide the info, the links, etc. And this below this is where you could consider potentially including a script. So the tell them you are a social worker, include your name and home address, share your thoughts, etc. You could flesh that out even more specifically for people to aid them in taking action with a legislator. You can see that this is a pretty focused and simple pattern to follow. And we really do strive to have these brief alerts be no more than 1 page. You increase the likelihood that anyone will read it if it's 1 page, and even more so that they'll take action, because that action is right here on this first page. So thinking first about that first condition of how we want change to happen, if we're looking at changes in laws or statutes. My guess is that many of you as social workers are connected to different coalitions or advocacy groups or professional groups that relate to the issues and concerns that you have for your practice, for your clients, etc. Oftentimes you may receive information from an advocacy group that is seeking support for advocacy action, and you may think like this is a really important time for others to know about this. I don't know how many people know that this bill is even happening. How can I put this together into a brief policy brief for action now? So here's an example of such a thing. Again, related to our issue that we learned about in the policy brief from the MSU students. We can see here that sometimes we get information from a coalition, such as the Coalition to Increase Teachers of Color and American Indian Teachers in Minnesota. If you are working in the schools and are concerned about representation of teachers, this may be a coalition you're following, and you may learn about this Increase Teachers of Color Act and be interested, concerned, and wanting others to take action on this. They've included information here about the bill numbers, etc., and a link to finding out what that status is. And let's say that you learned that this bill is going to committee and needs to be supported so that it can be passed and continue progress in our legislative process in Minnesota. But this site here has a lot of information. You wouldn't want to just send people to this site and say, please do something. You would want to provide perhaps a focused brief to help people learn about this issue. And this is where you might pop over, to a template such as this. You of course would not represent NASW Minnesota unless you have been asked or given approval to use this, but this template pattern you are welcome to use in terms of the problem, the proposed solution. So here you may talk about what is the issue about having poor representation of BIPOC teachers in our schools. What is the impact of that? What is the proposed solution? And then you'll talk about what this policy is designed to do in terms of financial support and otherwise for BIPOC teachers. Why does this matter to social work? You can link back to our concerns about justice and equity. What do critics say? Well, I'm not really sure on this issue. You are not required to provide this, but if you're aware of what some of the criticism is and why this may be struggling to get through the legislature, you could certainly include it. And your action steps. It might be to contact your legislator to take action on this. If your legislator is part of a specific committee that's hearing this, you may encourage people to particularly reach out to those legislators, etc., and provide a script to please support this legislation for increasing teachers of color in Minnesota. That's how simple this can be. It's an issue you're probably following, an issue you're probably concerned about. So that is one way to plug in information you're getting from other sources that you want others in your social work network to take action upon. Going back to our promoting equity and education brief here, that we can also look at creating briefs that take different aspects of this. As we know here from all this information, they are suggesting solutions that have to do with legislative changes as well as changes in school climate. Well, here are a couple examples of ways that you can take this information and put it into a one-page brief. I will zoom in closer in a moment so that you can see more specifically the information. But here is a brief where, point out a couple things. It is one page. Not bad, huh? Also, this was fairly simple to make. I found a template through Microsoft products and a free template, downloaded it, used it to my advantage. You can see here that great title, the Solutions Not Suspensions, I've grabbed that. And it's time for racial equity in our schools, sort of a call to action to social workers. The date here on top so people know how present this is. I borrowed from this statement from the student's brief again because it states right on top what it is we seek. At this point, I am going to zoom in a little so we can read that together because I imagine it's small for you as well. All right, so we can see it's time to end exclusionary discipline practice in our schools. Equity demands a commitment to systemic practices that create opportunities and foster a positive, supportive, affirming school climate where all students can learn, grow, and thrive. I have chosen in this brief to focus upon practices, that second area, policies and practices in schools. So based on, as you can see here in the what can be done, the action I seek, I'm looking for schools to make changes, to invest in equitable opportunities. I have focused in on social emotional learning and the restorative justice in educational practices, and have provided some specific information and links for more info, and the direction to tell your school PTO or school board. Seeing this as motivating concerned parents, teachers, and others to approach their schools to seek this policy and practice change. Backing up, you can see the main bits of the policy brief. What is exclusionary discipline? So essentially defining this problem. Identifying it as being particularly a problem disproportionately experienced by BIPOC students, included this nice figure that the students created. The why does this matter? Provided, I got this information from the students as well, some links to the citations for this. And then that leads into these ideas of what can be done. Fairly straightforward, and truly this could be shared with a school community, perhaps when they're approaching a school board meeting time or a PTO, to get the support and build power of the group to move toward the school making these kinds of changes. So a brief focused upon changing policies and practices. Similarly, I have taken their brief and focused it toward legislative change. So in this, again, it looks very similar, doesn't it? It's focused somewhat differently. In the what can be done is significantly different, and then also I've included the current policy situation. Chose to exclude the graphic in order to have these other points and keep this on one page. Let me make it bigger again. Whoops, way too big. It's as if we're live. Here we go. So again, very same start to all of this, same definition, because the problem is still the same. The why does it matter? Still the same. And so we have here added this current policy situation where it just talks about the Pupil Fair Dismissal Act, and the issues with that, the problems with that. The what can be done. And here we have legislative recommendations on the federal level, asking the legislator to support Trauma-Informed Schools Act and what that means, providing links to that. On the state level, encouraging that our state could also have Trauma-Informed Schools Act at the state level. A link to information on that, as well as to encourage state legislators to further amend the Pupil Fair Dismissal Act in 3 significant ways. Um, and and then again, we could also look at decision makers on the school board level, encouraging your school community to commit to becoming a resilient and trauma-informed community. So this is very targeted at decision makers for policy change on the level of statutes and laws. So with this, very similar, slightly different format. My hope is with this that you feel empowered to take the information that you have uniquely as social workers to be able to transform it into a reasonable and timely action alert. You really are seeking to share the things you're concerned about with others, as we truly are stronger together. The more voices we raise, the more we raise them in unity for change, the more likely change can happen. This does not mean anything happens quickly, but it certainly is much more likely to happen the more of us who get involved, play a role, and help provide actionable information to our peers and colleagues, legislators, and other decision makers. Thanks for your attention, and I hope that you're able to take steps with what you've learned. Take care.